Welcome back, everyone. Episode 4 of the Nabeel Naqvi Podcast, brought to you by Affinity Law. I am super happy to have my friend and lawyer, Zain Ali, joining us today for his inaugural episode, first episode on the podcast. And today we're going to be talking about Zain's story, litigation. So all you future lawyers out there, future law students who want to get into litigation, you're going to want to listen up to this episode. And we're going to talk about personal injury as well. So let's get right into it. Zain, welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure to be on. Thank you.
So Zain, let's hear about your story. We know a lot about the other partners at the firm, other lawyers at the firm, but we want to hear about Zain. How did you get into law? Where did it start? Law school? Let's hear it.
All right. I'm not sure how many people out there would like to hear my story, but since you're asking, I'll share it anyway.
Yes.
It's not your typical law story. It's not a story where, you do some kind of political science and you always wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, I wanted to originally be an engineer, chemical engineer. Wow. That interest morphed into maybe being a doctor. Did an undergrad in biochemistry. Decided I wasn't as good a doctor as my mom was. Waking up 3 a.m. I probably wanted to do it more for the money than anything. So
Sure.
Had a moment of reckoning with myself. Decided I just was gonna not do that and went to business school, where my interests were.
Right.
And I actually ended up working at this really cool office called an industry liaison office, which what they do is they take technologies from professors' lab benches, and then they help commercialize them. So it was a commercialization type of gig where I was the MBA student intern helping out. And as part of that, they patent a lot of stuff. So I thought, oh, wow, patent lawyers are really cool.
So you must have learned a lot about patents and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. The NPT, this Canadian Intellectual Property Office, how much time you get, how to protect what you've invented, right? And so I thought to myself, why not go to law school and be like these cool, awesome lawyers who also have a science background like I had at the time. Yes. I was going to have my MBA shortly thereafter. And I said, why not add on law as like that final icing on the cake and be that patent lawyer? So truth be told, that's when I decided I was going to go to law school and be a patent lawyer, which quickly changed. And maybe we can get into that.
So we went from medicine to patents and then to law school. Okay.
That's right. Okay. And in law school, after first year, that drive kind of tilted. I'll say there was a little bit of a pivot into wanting to do business law.
And where was law school again for the audience?
So it was at Osgoode Hall.
Very nice.
And very thankful.
What was that experience like? Because I know a lot of lawyers who've been to many law schools, but I want to hear about your Osgoode law experience.
I would say that it's one of the better law schools to go to. It was such an incredible experience, from the colleagues to the professors to the dean at the time. We got to study the law from multiple angles, retired judges, panels where we had Supreme Court judges visit us. Yeah. We had crazy good moot sessions in practice and otherwise, which was done through other bodies and entities. We had awesome clinics. I was part of the Osgoode Venture Capital Clinic, where I got really good experience. Sometimes we'd go into firms, work from there, got to be a caseworker, got to be a recruiter for some of the clinics. It was an incredible experience. Got to do some research, undertook some advanced courses that are not otherwise available. So for example, securities law being an example, where I was able to take not just securities law, I was able to do advanced securities, and I was able to take a paper course, which is not something that is typically available at that advanced of a level at other law schools.
Amazing.
That I was able to specialize and do a deep dive into.
Right. So then after law school, I know, again, you've never been a traditional guy. Like, you've always kind of done things outside the box, and you've been an entrepreneur. So after law school, walk me through those few years after law school. What did you end up getting into after that?
So it was an interesting journey. I started working, I articled in corporate law.
Okay.
I worked in corporate law, and then I actually launched a DTC brand.
That's it. That's what I wanted to get into.
I became an entrepreneur for a little while, and that was a very incredible experience where we launched the brand, turned it into a 7-figure brand. Learned at that point, one point, all I was doing was influencer marketing agreements with YouTubers, and all we were doing was negotiating their stipends and the commissions to be paid to various YouTubers for the work they would do for the brand. And that was an incredible journey. But I got to really apply some of the science because it was a skincare related medical devices brand. So I was able to apply, again, tie in my science to understand how the device works, to pull everything from MBA school that you learn about marketing and accounting and strategy and go-to-market approaches. So I was able to implement that. And the whole while, although my parents would have a different opinion about me applying my law at the time and how much of a lawyer I was at that time, but it was very much a helpful skill set to have, because we did financing rounds with Shopify, which is, as you know, one of the largest e-commerce platforms, but they have a capital department which provides funding. And so reviewing those agreements came in, the legal skill set came in handy to review those. We actually got in a very interesting legal battle with a lender, which was a loan shark type of setup, and having the legal
I've experienced in that stuff.
Went a long way. Yeah, it was incredible. You know what? I'll say this: having to your point about being the person, the chameleon that switches from science to business to law and to business and then back to law. It teaches you a lot. But the one thing about each of those things is that knowledge is never lost in my experience now. It's always applied where you least sometimes expect it. You never know why. Sometimes actually undergrads will often question, right? Why am I studying algebra, or why am I doing history, or why am I studying this? I'm never going to use this. Well, you never know when it becomes useful. So those commercial law classes I took, the bankruptcy and solvency classes I took in law school, they all came in handy when it came time to negotiate my own agreement and the liens that we were trying to get removed at the time. Even though I wasn't a practicing lawyer, I was an entrepreneur, but I could then find the right lawyers, and we did at the time hire a team of lawyers for the various things that we were getting into.
And that's a great point, because I find like these days, kids will get really set on, okay, I have to become a lawyer, and then they'll only do courses, they'll only do things that are geared towards law. But for myself, and clearly with you, I had the benefit, now looking back, to not go to law school right away and work. So after law school, I went and worked at IBM for 2 years. And just having that experience working in the corporate world was such an amazing thing. So speak to that in terms of how important it is for lawyers to get other type of experiences in their lives and not just be going down that tunnel vision of, I just got to become a lawyer. And then by the end of it, you may not have developed all the skills you need to actually be a business person, or to grow your practice or something like that, or marketing, like how you're so involved in our marketing plans now, because you have that experience.
Absolutely. And I know it's really, really hard to decide, especially when you're young, and especially when you may not have lawyers in the family that you can then chart their journeys and see that, they've done all these different things, because all you're trying to do as an undergrad is get into law school. If that's your dream, then all you want to do is, look at the routes of, I guess, those that you don't know personally. And you often see people, especially down south of the border, where most politicians had that lawyer background. So when you look at lawyers, you often also see similar paths where political science, again, as I mentioned, it comes into play. And those are one of the things that you try to do as this sure path. So it actually reminds me of a really interesting meeting I had with this professor turned millionaire, still practicing, and teaching. And I actually had a meeting with this professor who had developed this really cool technology and made millions in the process. And this was at the juncture of me having done my double major in biochem and biotech and wanting to do MBA school. So this was that juncture when I met him, and I was asking him, if I switch from science to business, how weird would that be? How would I look? How would my resume look? Isn't this the wrong thing for me to do? Isn't it natural for me to go just do a master's and a PhD? Isn't that the natural route? I live with a bunch of PhDs because I was in academic floors at the university at the time. So I had a lot of exposure and knowledge from these guys on that front, on what the path on the science route looks like.
Sure.
And so you know what that prof said? And it stuck with me. He said, the path often not taken or less taken is littered with more rewards. And I just took a step back and I think he said it in a more eloquent way than I just presented it. But it was something that I had to think about. And I thought to myself that, you know what? Yes, I'm that risk taker. And I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna do something wildly different. I did not do an undergrad in business. So to tie that into what you're asking about law students, I think, yes, it's really wild to do an undergrad in the sciences. But guess what? When it comes to patent lawyers, some of the best patent lawyers out there, for example, when they patent a technological invention, it could be the new infotainment system in a Hyundai, right? Or an Apple screen, often tend to have an engineering background from their undergrad. Sometimes they even have a master's in engineering. Then they go to law school, and then they become patent agents and trademark agents. And so they're able to understand the invention from an engineering perspective. They're able to put in the right application, and they're able to create the right guardrails around the technology as a lawyer and patent agent. So you can never think, and especially more relevant now than ever because of the, crazy, boom that we have in AI and technologies that, your skill set needs to be specialized more and more. So we find, right, to be more and more productive.
Just interrupt you. You've been at the forefront of this AI stuff. So speak to that. Like, where do you see this industry going, especially for lawyers in transactional work? I have so many people contacting me saying, hey, what's going to happen to my job? Like, where do you see AI and legal, that intersection, and specifically the job market heading?
I'm an optimist. So I always take the angle of things are going to get better because technology as we know it has, and technological innovations have in the last 20 years, 30 years since I've started using technology, been nothing but a blessing if you've used it the right way. Yeah. Now, of course, you could be scrolling on TikTok all day and wasting your day, but the way AI is being implemented in our industry, it's helping us be better lawyers so you can focus on what matters. Okay, that's right. Yeah. So if you're in the case of today's theme being advocacy and litigation, if what you're trying to do is be a better advocate, and all you want to do is get some killer points that go into a memo or go into an argument or go into a motion from a meeting that you just had with a client or internally, AI can be that one thing that summarizes it for you, presents the facts in bullet point form, and you're able to then use your intellect and experience and expedience and apply those things in a manner that is going to make you more efficient and be a better advocate. So you can spend more time in the courtroom, or you can spend more time on the more complex stuff. And I think with, artificial general intelligence getting to a level where things are going to get, I guess, higher and higher in terms of the IQ that AI applies to problems, I think that efficiency gains will increase with time. And so you'll just have more time to focus on for example, witness prep. Which is something AI, I would argue, cannot yet do.
Not yet.
Right.
No.
So in my view, you could take the view that, I can produce a quick agreement with ChatGPT. So why do I need a lawyer? That's one way of looking at it. Or it's, as a lawyer, I would say, I would be able to do all that. And then I can plug in what remains
and enhance
and make it that bulletproof, watertight agreement.
Right.
So I see synergies. I see this evolving in a way where we're just all doing better. But again, it comes down to, just like ChatGPT, how good is your prompt? How well do you use the tool? And if you don't know anything about anything, how are you going to command it to create what it needs to create? How are you going to know what to ask, what not to ask, what to look for, what are the pitfalls, and how to, address that in your agreement, for example? Okay.
So now what everyone is here to hear about, litigation, what makes a good litigation lawyer. But we're going to take a break first and be right back. Hey, everybody. The Nabeel Naqvi Podcast is brought to you by Affinity Law, my law firm. We're a full-service firm, which means if it touches your life, we probably cover it. Buying or selling a home, you already know. Our real estate team makes sure you're protected. Running a business, our corporate lawyers help you grow with confidence. If you're injured in an accident, we'll fight to get you compensated with our best personal injury lawyers. Facing workplace issues, our employment lawyers are on your side. Planning for the future or moving to Canada, wills, estates, immigration, we have you covered every step of the way. At Affinity Law, you don't just get a lawyer. You get a team that protects your interests across every part of your life and business. Affinity Law, full service, no nonsense. Now let's get into the show. Okay, we're back and we're getting right into what you want to hear about, litigation. We have our litigator, Zain Ali, here. So Zain, once you get a file, or let me put it this way, what is a typical ideal file that you look for when you're litigating, when it comes to the flow and other things that you're looking at? What is the ideal type of format that you want your file, or the things that you look at in a litigation file? I'm not sure if I'm asking it the right way.
So when you're looking at a file, at Affinity Law, we have this thing called FFA,
Yes.
full file approach. And that's exactly the lens that we have to take when looking at a litigation file. It starts with knowing what is it the client's looking for, right? I can have ideas and I can make those ideas available to the client as their advocate. And I can tell them what the law allows for.
Right.
But I have to first and foremost align with what it is that the client has contracted our firm to do on their behalf. And if it is legally permissible and physically possible and legally possible, then we're going to do everything that one needs to make that result come about for them, because that is what the client hired us for and is paying us for. And so we're going to try and do that. So we take a full file approach. We're going to have a theory of the file. We're going to have to know the pitfalls. There's always a risk.
So you mentioned that word before, theory of the case. Can you just expand on that a little bit? What are you talking about when you mention theory of the case?
So with experience and with having done hundreds of files, you'll come to understand the general expectations at the different turns and stages of the file and how it's going to turn out.
Right.
If you do this, that happens. You trigger this, A happens. If you trigger B, C happens, right? Or D could happen. And E happening, there's a 5% chance. So you advise clients, obviously, you're communicating all the way. So that's, again, another skill you'll need to have as a lawyer, is to constantly communicate. Now, thankfully, we have teams, we have layers, and we have a hierarchy. Not to say that we don't have a flat model at the law firm. We everyone's welcome to walk into the office, but thankfully, we have in this full file approach, lots of people that are able to communicate with the client at different stages as they become relevant and as we arrive at those stages.
Yes.
So there's much to say, but I think hopefully that kind
we
of
have an amazing team. Yeah.
Yes. But that generally is how we would take it, as a complete full file approach, where we would then look at the theory, we would implement different tactics and filings and motions and whatever, every case is different, right? The facts of a case often determine what you're going to do on that file.
Absolutely. So this ties into our next question that listeners have asked. What makes a good litigator versus a bad litigator?
Ooh, you're putting me in a tough spot here. I'll start by saying I'm not a great litigator. Wow.
You can throw anyone under the bus if you want
Okay. Well, I think knowing the procedure, knowing the substance, and being a good communicator, as I just mentioned, I would say are the basics. Yes. What I like to think of when I look at one lawyer versus another, you coming on par, something I learned in MBA school, competitive parity, you matching those basics is not you being a great litigator, in my view. You knowing the procedure is an essential. You knowing the law, well, your client expects you to know the law. Right. You communicating regular updates is also something your client would expect reasonably to have every now and then. So this is just you coming on par with what makes an okay lawyer. What makes a great litigator is a litigator knowing when to action what on a file at what stage the file's at. So him knowing for example, let's just work with an example, right? Yeah. Say there's a construction dispute going on between two mega corporations out there, and you're representing one of them, another firm's representing the other, and you're going to have, multiple things that are outstanding as claims between the parties.
Sure.
So you, as a great litigator, you might pick the most important to your client, and potentially in terms of quantum and damages and money and recovery, that one point, and you might bring a special motion to clarify some points on that. Now, that's a litigation move that you might make on that file, because without that clarity, that file could go off the rails.
Right.
Like a train headed for the ditch. So if you wanna be responsible,
like the Toronto Maple Leafs these days.
Right. I'm not gonna speak to that. There's a lot of fans out there on both sides, but really it comes down to you taking command of the file, knowing what's happening on your file. So this is one thing we do at Affinity, is we stay in touch and we have these group meets and meetings to follow up on what's really happening, what's the progress, what came in, what went out, right? Where are we at on this file? If we don't do that regularly, no amount of advocacy and theatrics in a courtroom is gonna save the day.
Absolutely. Okay, Zain, and our final question for today is again from the young listeners. A lot of young listeners, I love it, very encouraging. So they want to know, if they do want to eventually be a litigator, no interest in transactional law at all, just litigation, what steps should they taking now in terms of learning, or if they're in law school, any tips or tricks that you can tell them in terms of things to learn now or get into to be a successful litigator in the future?
That's a great question. I used to ask this question when I was a young guy in trying to establish what kind of skills should I add to my skill set to be able to be that killer litigator one day, or transactional lawyer one day at the time, which is what my drive was. So I'd say investing in yourself is the best investment you can make. And I think it seems too vague of an answer, but I would say the things that you use: drafting, having emotional intelligence, having confidence, being okay with comfort, discomfort, and then being able to take that 30,000 foot bird's eye view of a file, of a complex file. These are things that come through you trying and engaging with lots of different things. So if you, for example, are a student and you're up and coming and you just decide to be the president of your local club, I think that teaches you skills. That teaches you delegation. That teaches you how to set an agenda. That teaches you lots of that. That's why they say do lots of volunteer work. And it doesn't all have to be with law, right? As I mentioned, it could be a whole lot of things. But of course, nothing beats real on the work experience. At Affinity, we've got lots of volunteer opportunities. Watching a litigator work their magic and being their student who's drafting for them, or who's reviewing for them, or is proofreading for them, or is helping with the motion materials, or who's doing the summaries. This is all great priceless stuff. This is priceless, worth its weight in gold type of stuff that really helps you build those skills. Because later you're going to hone them with experience and hundreds of cases, case after case. You're just going to get better at it. But in the beginning, it's about acquisition of skills. And you just want to get the broadest skill set possible. Get speaking opportunities if you can, get out of your shell. Become a public speaker if you get an opportunity at your local, I don't know what they call them, the Toastmaster Club.
They have that, yes. Right.
Get out there. Get involved with stuff. It's better to do that than doom scroll on your phone, because you're just consuming content. But when you're a producer of content, it could be the most basic thing that you put out, and your first talk could be the most embarrassing, nerve-wracking experience. But once you do a few of those, that's a new skill that you just developed that you were always so scared to develop.
Right.
But you now have got it. And the more breadth of skills that you add to your arsenal, the more prepared and confident that you are the day that it becomes important. Your big day in court in front of the nine judge panel of the Supreme Court of Canada.
Wow. Right.
If you get there.
Right. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Zain, for joining us today. First of many, as I said. Again, this was episode 4, brought to you by the amazing people at Digital Dash Marketing. I want to thank Shihab. Also, you'll be seeing some reels from another lawyer of ours who's going to be on the Instagram and on all our socials. So again, thanks for joining us, guys. Have a great day.